All right, we want to take you now to West Texas, where Blue Origin is getting ready for its 9th space tourism flight. People on board the New Shepard flight include so-called space scout Emily Calandrelli, married couple Mark and Sharon Hagel, and Austin Littoral, who won a spot on the rocket capsule in a giveaway. This is the second space flight for the Hagels. The entire flight will last about 10 to 12 minutes. We're going to take the whole thing. Let's watch.
In the green zone today for launch. We're at T-minus 30 seconds. Let's hand it off to mission control and launch this rocket.
Tap off, temp low. Looking to proceed.
This is thermal.
Believe so. T-minus 16, guidance internal.
Yeah, go to proceed.
T-minus 10, go to proceed. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1. Ignition.
To space. Follow along with us on your screen. We have velocity picking up. We're gaining altitude as New Shepard pierces through the atmosphere. You see that BE-3 engine at 100% power level. New Shepard is approaching max Q here soon, where the aerodynamic stress on that vehicle is at its max.
feet.
New Shepard has passed max Q. BE-3 is pushing back up to 100% as the atmosphere gets thinner and higher.
40,000 feet.
Yeah, right now the astronauts are experiencing increasing Gs. This is going to increase from 1 to 3 Gs here. That's 3 times your weight pushing you down into that seat as you launch to space.
Quite a ride. We're nearing 2 minutes of boost, about 2 minutes into our mission. So our next big milestone here is main engine cutoff, where that BE-3 engine will temporarily terminate.
2 minutes negative MDF.
Yeah. 10 seconds to MECO. 150,000 feet. MECO.
There it is, that MECO, or main engine cutoff. Our vehicle is now coasting at 2,000 miles per hour. Coming up here soon, we'll have the separation of the crew capsule from the booster. And what do we have there, Alice? On the bottom of our screen, we have our 0G indicator.
250,000 feet.
You can see it in the center of your screen. Separation is confirmed. The crew capsule is floating in 0G as the New Shepard booster starts its descent back to the landing pad. An absolutely huge congratulations to all 6 of our crew. They are officially astronauts.
All right. You've been watching live coverage of the very latest Blue Origin space launch. It's the 9th space tourism flight. So let's go ahead and bring in CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood to talk more about this historic moment. Bill, So are these space tourist flights seeming to you to be getting sort of more routine? It happens so quickly. It's sort of, I know if you're probably a passenger on Blue Origin, it's incredibly exhilarating. But for those of us watching on the ground, being the ninth, it does seem like it's sort of over before you even blink.
Yeah, you know, from launch to landing is about 10 minutes. And you're right, this is the ninth flight with people on board. So at some point, I won't say routine because as a space reporter, we never, ever call rocket flights routine. I mean, when you're riding on top of a rocket and accelerating to these speeds into a vacuum environment, there's nothing routine about that yet anyway, maybe in 20 or 50 years. But, you know, we still have to watch these closely because something can go wrong with these flights. And with these kinds of missions, when something goes wrong, it's usually catastrophic. But so far, their flights with people on board have been flawless. Blue Origin's got a very reliable rocket engine, very reliable rocket. And, of course, their spacecraft, the Capsule itself, has done perfectly during all of their flights. So routine, no. Worth tracking, yes.
Given your years of experience covering the space program here in the United States, Bill, you hear the announcer say, "Congratulations to the crew, you're officially astronauts." By the definition, are they?
You know, it's a debatable point. Certainly these private companies like Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, they want their passengers to think they're going to be astronauts. You know, NASA and the Department of Defense, they think 50 miles up is the point where space begins. It's where the atmosphere no longer has any effect on flaps and rudders and things like that. And by that definition, they're astronauts. But I think, you know, when you consider the training required for professional astronauts and the sort of missions they do in orbit compared to these suborbital up and down flights like we're seeing today, it's hard for me to consider these passengers astronauts in any kind of traditional sense.
Yeah, because if I was to be a passenger on one of these Blue Origin flights, Bill, I would put in my bio, Vladimir Zutip, astronaut. And that's why I asked the question.
Absolutely.
Let's bring in
and really, nobody can argue with you. You know, I mean, you flew above 50 miles. By that definition, you're an astronaut.
I kind of felt like an astronaut when I was in the old Concorde way back when. So yeah, let's bring in space expert Scott Heidler to join Bill Harwood and our coverage of the ninth launch of the Blue Origin tourism flight. Scott, your thoughts as we watch the capsule returning to Earth.
Yeah, I definitely want to hop on something that Bill had mentioned, and that is that spaceflight is never easy. And you hear any engineer, lower level, all the way up to the head of NASA, they say over and over again, spaceflight is not easy. Space is not easy. And that even goes for these types of flights, space tourism flights, if you will. As Bill mentioned, you know, that any small thing could go wrong that could end up in a catastrophe. So there's a big focus on that. But also, you know, going beyond that about the specific mission, this type of travel, and that it is space tourism, but what it does is more than just give 6 people the ride of their life. It exposes a lot of folks, and we're seeing it come right down the booster landing right now. When you look at that image right there, a booster landing on ground safely that can be used again, that's part of what this is all about too. That is development. So even though you have 6 folks,
yeah, that's very cool to me. Sorry, Scott, there was another person in my ear. Were you still speaking?
Yeah, sorry. And so bottom line is, yes, space tourism, but also it helps the space companies understand and improve their launch systems, because the more you do it, the more you learn.
Yeah, and that's my question to the both of you. And you're right, watching the booster coming down, to me, is it's actually cooler than watching it go up. I don't know, something about the way those reverse thrusters fire up as it safely makes its way down gently to the ground is kind of cool. And so, Bill, are we, you know, I know there's tourists on board, but are there also any kind of experiments that the scientists are picking up from just this launch?
Not on this flight. I mean, Blue Origin may have some instrumentation on the booster that's collecting more data. You know, they're also designing a moon lander and other vehicles like that, they're taking all this landing data and plugging back into that. But this flight doesn't have any crew-tended research on board, but Blue Origin routinely launches NASA experiments, corporate university experiments. They've launched the New Shepard without any people on board, just instruments. And so in that sense, yeah, it's a useful suborbital platform. But I stress again, they're getting 3 to 4 minutes maybe of weightlessness. That's it. They don't go to orbit. So it kind of limits the research you can do. But the scientists say it is absolutely useful, and they take advantage of that.
So, Scott, we can see the capsule coming back down to Earth. Describe what potentially those tourists are feeling like right now.
Right now, they're on the tail end of the ride of their life, if you will. And as Bill just said, it's short, but it's something that two of them on board have experienced it before. From a couple from Central Florida here, it's got to be amazing now because you're kind of after that peak of euphoria, if you will. There's the idea of when you're at apogee, when you're seeing the Earth for the first time from that perspective, it does something inside. It does something to you as a person. So I'm sure they're chit-chatting about that. I'm sure they're reveling about the experience that they just had. Again, for two of them, it's the second time. So it's again kind of going through that experience. But then also I would be, of course, I've thought this through many, many times. At this point too, it's like, yes, you're going through this amazing experience and it's about to come to an end. But I'm also like, when is that going to finish? When am I going to hit the ground, which we're about to see right now?
Yeah, I wonder, gents, I sort of joked earlier that I'd flown on the Concorde many, many years ago when it was active. And I can't remember now, but I seem to recall that it flew at 40,000 feet. And I remember the pilot telling us to look out the window when we were at our highest altitude. And you could, just above the clouds see the blueness of space. So I'm guessing that when you're in that capsule, you see it's the reverse. You're looking down at the Earth as opposed to looking up. You are, for all intents and purposes, in space, right, Bill?
Yes, for all intents and purposes, although I think the Concorde flew up pretty close to 60,000 feet. But, the New Shepard capsule is well over 200,000 feet. They are really up there. And the view out those windows, and I'll point out the New Shepard has the largest windows of any spacecraft currently flying. You get an incredible view up there. There's no question about that. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader, but the pictures are pretty spectacular. So, the flight lasts 10 minutes, but the views you get at the top of that trajectory, I can't even imagine the memories you take home from something like that. Professional astronauts see that all the time, but for civilians, that's a unique view, no question.
Yeah, you definitely jarred my memory there, Bill. You're right. It was about 60,000 feet because normal planes fly at 40,000. But I still recall just that sense of wonder and amazement at that altitude. So you're right. I can only imagine what it's like for those passengers on this 9th voyage of Blue Origin as a space tourism flight. Bill, Scott, thank you both very, very much. We'll speak to you on the next one.